Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makudi. The time's 23 minutes past 8, and we're going to be kickstarting the show with a rather interesting turn of events. We'll be looking at a bold policy turn in South Africa, the DA's new bill that seeks to redirect the focus of empowerment from race to poverty. In that context, we speak with the founder and chair of public interest, SA Tebogo Khaas, a veteran activist in governance, accountability, and inclusion. And we'll be asking what the shift means for BEE. What does it mean for poverty alleviation and for South Africa's broader democratic project 30 plus years on? Mr. Cass, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Good morning. And it's always a pleasure having you on air.
Good morning, and thank you for having me this morning.
No, the pleasure's all ours. I think let's jump right into it. How would you summarize the DA's proposed new bill that seeks to focus on poverty rather than race, rather than redressing the effects of apartheid, which to this day are still felt and are still seen by many South Africans, even those that are born post 1994?
First, it is an attempt for trickle-down economics in terms of development, which we know that it never happens anywhere in the world. And at worst, it is a misguided notion that you can undo race-based policies of apartheid by employing methods that are not race-based. If you want to deal with race-based issues, you have to mitigate them with a deliberate address of the issue, which is predicated on race, which then translates to economic development and empowerment of those who are marginalized.
And I think it's very, very important to note that. Just looking from your vantage point, what are some of the key strengths and weaknesses you see in shifting policy from a primarily race-based framework to a poverty-based one?
Look, the question is, even if you look at the ANC's policies, from including, let's focus on ASGISA, for example, accelerated and shared initiative for growth, ASGISA, growth, ASGISA. Sorry, I forgot how the whole acronym stands for, but the Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative of South Africa, which was introduced around 2006. 2004, 2006, with an expectation that by a certain period, by 2014, government would have halved poverty and it would have also halved unemployment rate. Of course, it failed. Because why? It was dependent on a key issue or which was mainly wishful thinking that there would be economic growth. It was predicated of a growth rate of 4.5, economic growth rate of 4.5 between 2004 and 2006, which never materialized, and post that a growth rate of 6%. Now, if you could fail even with those growth rates that you enjoyed around those times, which are much higher than we do currently, where we are now basically stagnation, if not deflating the economy, you are onto a losing start because there is no economic growth. There's nothing to even do. The kind of things that we wish for when the economy was doing well, but never could be realized. Point number one. And point number two, it cannot be that the DA wants to sell policies that it has failed to show that they work in the Western Cape. If the DA was to come back and say, look, we've halved poverty in Cape Town, or we've eradicated poverty in Cape Town, we've halved unemployment or eradicated unemployment in Cape Town, maybe we could start listening. But here we are talking about something that they fail to show us that they've been able to do or they can demonstrably do. So for me, it's a question of why don't you go back to the existing policies, be it triple BE or ASGISA or any of the other NDP and all this, and see where the problem is, where the problem lies, and being able to undo or mitigate those issues that are stunting growth or stumbling growth and economic development. So it is not about introducing new coming up with a new policy thinking that it will just be a magic wand to do with all the problems that you are facing. So it is somehow misguided. That's what I'm saying. It is a bit misguided, and there's no meat in terms of the house. It cannot be that you're thinking that by for neglecting the fact that race is an issue, the issues of special development are an issue. I mean, how can you say somebody who has to travel 30 kilometers or even longer to work must compete on an equal footing with somebody who just lives where they work or adjacent to where they work? To start with, you cannot do that. So you have to address the imbalances that have been present and are still here. And by the way, don't get me wrong, BEE has been a spectacular disappointment. But the disappointment lies in the implementation. We have seen in the past people who were not involved in a particular sector only because they are politically connected, leveraging off their political connectiveness to gain access and enrich themselves. I can use the example of the Elephant Consortium that went and got a stake in Telkom, and around the time when SPC was also a Malaysian company, was also a shareholder. The individuals, notably one of the principals, Smart Ngonyama, famously said, I did not struggle to be rich. I mean, I did not struggle to be poor. So in other words, I struggled to be rich. So at any cost, by any means necessary, that's when greed comes in. That's when greed makes sure that those who are actually getting the opportunities, they don't add value, but they're extracting value from the economy. And you ask yourself, how much have any of those individuals invested in the economy? Very little, if any. So that is where the nub of the problem is. And we are encouraged by the fact that there's a realization that we need to start looking at how do you empower communities at large. But it cannot be that you become blind to the issue of color, because color is also a determinant factor in our economic status.
Most definitely. And in a country like ours where race and poverty are so intertwined, I think it would be a big blunder to try and separate the two. I wanted to focus on a point that you just briefly touched on, the failures of BEE since its introduction a few, 20 plus years ago. How do we now start having a conversation around readjusting it, redressing it, making sure that it's inclusive for all South Africans and not just the politically connected, as you mentioned? Also keeping cognizant to the fact that challenges like these ones from the Democratic Alliance are going to come simply because of the failures of the proper implementation of BEE.
Yeah, you see, where the problem lay was from inception, BEE was mainly focused on equity. And you know who benefits when you go and buy? It's the very same white people that you borrow from, because you have to go, those who make the deals, they need their cut, and then the banks also come in before you can even talk about declaring equity and all that. So very few people will be likely to work with the net worth after the fact, assuming the company does well and it stays like they or improves. So chances are, for as long as you're focusing on equity, you're actually saying, let us accommodate a certain raise for 30% or 15%, depending on the sector where the BEE is being construction is being done, transaction is being done. So that on its own is a limiting factor. What government ought to have done from the beginning, and there's still time, it can start doing now, it doesn't have to be too late to not be considered, is to ensure that there's deliberate investment in infrastructure that will benefit those that were hitherto excluded from the mainstream economy. And by that, I mean, if you look at countries, they may not call it BEE or whatever it is. Even if the United States, for example, if it was not for the United States government investing in, through the Defense Department of Defense, investing in global satellite positioning systems, there would never be cell phones today. There will never be GPS. There will never be, But then companies sprouted and made sure that they can start developing products or products out of the infrastructure that government has laid for. So that type of investment are expensive, capital intensive by nature, but a government can be able to make sure that they can leverage off the taxes or its revenue to invest in those infrastructure. Now, if you start taking that deliberate action and you say, what are the issues that afflict Black development or Black entrepreneurs development, then you say if it's infrastructure, then what type of infrastructure? What can we make sure that we create and make available the underlying infrastructure so that people can build on it products and services that they can then offer the world. And you do that delivery targeting, whether you call it enterprise development or whether you call it supplier development, it's really neither here nor there. But the fact of the matter, you'll be taking out of the equation a major, pain point for entrepreneurship. And in so doing, you're going to allow or see the emergence of new ventures. And that would then attract venture capital to make sure. But if you're going to just focus on equity, chances are individuals are just going to go and be borrowers instead of creators or innovators. And we need innovators more than anything else. If you do that, by reason of numbers, you're going to see more and more people, Black people, coming out of the poverty cycle and making sure they can start fending from themselves instead of being accommodated to a certain percentage in the economy by way of equity deals.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Mr. Tebogo Khaas. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on air and for giving us those very, very important insights.
Thank you for having me. Good day.
There you go. Tebogo Khaas, founder and chairperson of Public Interest South Africa, sharing very, very important insights. If you just joined us or got the back end of that conversation, we're discussing the Democratic Alliance proposed new bill that's sparking a lot of debate on whether South Africa should shift from race-based empowerment to a poverty-focused model. But I think in all that debate, one thing is clear. The question of transformation is far from settled. Nearly, 3 decades after democracy, we're still wrestling with what real empowerment looks like in practice and who it truly benefits. And it gets tricky because South Africa is changing. We are not the same South Africa as we were 30 years ago. So should transformation policies still reflect what we were as a country 30 years ago? Or should it evolve with the political, economic, and, socio-economic climate of the country? Because right now, you hear the conversation around BEE and whether or not it should be scrapped or should be focusing on a more poverty-focused model. Me, as a young person, born after 1994, I would think the most important pressing issue right now that all policymakers should be focusing on, and we should be debating policies and amendments to the constitution around, is youth unemployment. We have the highest youth unemployment rate in the world. So shouldn't that be an evolution of how we interpret transformation? Here's a question to you, just bring you into the conversation. Has broad-based Black economic empowerment, triple BEE or BEE for short, been a success or failure? Has it opened the doors for opportunity for many or only enriched a few? You can WhatsApp or voice note us of your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Our studio line is 011-680-0355, or you can send us that voice note or WhatsApp message on 0617660355. Let's not be stagnant in our thinking, man. There's bigger, more pressing issues right now. And I think that's what we should be focusing on. Getting young people into jobs, getting young people educated, skilled, and contributing to the economy. You have a young, vibrant majority of South Africans of working age that are sitting idle. You can go to any township, even suburb these days in South Africa right now, currently, and you'll find young people just loitering. Whether it's loitering on street corners, whether it's loitering by the spaza shop, or whether it's loitering by their mother's garages. But they're loitering and they're not contributing to the economy and future of this country. And these are people that were told, go to school, get a matric, get a degree, and ultimately serve this nation, and it will serve you back. But that's not happening. Never mind the race, gender, color, creed, religion. But ultimately, majority of young South Africans are not participating in the economy. And for me, That should be the biggest conversation. Going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we had a really, really wonderful conversation yesterday about a movie, an animation called Time Hoppers: The Silk Road. So if you have a family, you have kids, you should be listening to this conversation, and it'll be coming up right after this break.